Welcome to This Week in Cannabis Live. I am Jay Rosenthal. That is Jeremy Burke. We are both from Cultivated. Nope. That is Mark Hauser from Cannabis Musings. And that is Ben Larson from High Spirits, a cannabis business podcast. Welcome, Mark, Ben, and Jeremy.
Hey, guys. Good to see you.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It is almost a little bit more than halfway through the Olympic men's semifinal where Canada is losing to Finland 2-1. But as we were getting ready to go live, Canada scored a goal. So we are breathing a sigh, a slight sigh of relief here north of the border. It was I would say, a moderately busy week in cannabis news. Ben, we welcome you back from a couple weeks off of this show. But I want to start with Jeremy. Jeremy, and then we'll go around the horn for a bunch of other things. But Jeremy, we had a piece in our newsletter and the Real News, not just our newsletter, that a draft version of the new farm bill got introduced. And we know draft versions of new bills don't necessarily equal what comes out the other end of the sausage making.
Yeah.
But what did it say? What didn't it say? What are we paying attention to that everybody should know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, myself, and I think for our readers, we're mostly paying attention to if lawmakers are saying anything about hemp-derived THC. We did not see that addressed in the draft bill. But, there was some interesting details about supporting industrial hemp, supporting farmers. And so, maybe we'll see some, tweaking of the THC allowance numbers. The bill does go to markup next week on February 23rd. And so, look, this is very preliminary. I personally expected to see a little bit more, addressing the hemp THC ban. We didn't see much of that. This draft came from a Republican member. And so, it sort of focused on farmers and all the things that the Farm Bill is traditionally focused on. I think hemp and THC policy is probably a pretty small part of that purview. But we'll see. I mean, the bill's going to change in markup. I'm sure that, there will be some more advocacy and voices heard around the issue. And I saw, Ben nodding along a little bit because he knows that, a lot of these conversations are not happening in press releases, but behind closed doors.
Yeah, Ben, behind closed doors, you don't have to spill any beans if there are beans to spill. But on the general word that sausage making is done behind closed doors, this bill is far from done. This is a very early version. And my sense, having worked on the Hill, is that things as, not low level because they're important to us, but things as specific as this happen sometimes last minute, sometimes before the bill gets done. Like, what is your sense? Are your emails blowing up about this or just not yet?
No, my emails aren't blowing up about this. You're right. We might see something inserted in the 11th hour and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. That would actually be on par with what's happening in hemp and cannabis. However, I am excited to see that there wasn't actually any THC mentioned in the Farm Bill, because I've always felt that the Farm Bill was the wrong place to have consumer products be regulated. That belongs with the FDA, the TTB. The Farm Bill is supposed to define what is best for farmers, right? And so, let's leave it there. Let's also get it out of the appropriations bill. It shouldn't be in there as well. What we're seeing this year is specific language being brought to the industry, whether it's through Wyden or the Griffith bill, and so there is momentum in trying to kind of frame up a true regulatory framework, right? And so what we do know from the Hill is that what is being lobbied for is what should those frameworks look like and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be. And what I think this is laying the groundwork for is an opportunity for those conversations to start seeing some daylight. And so, I guess what I can say from behind the scenes is that there isn't a huge appetite for a broad hemp THC marketplace, but there is some appetite for therapeutic products or very low dose products in certain form factors. And I bet you will probably start seeing language around that in the coming months.
Well, we're going to use that as one of your predictions. I want to talk about, also just a note, it is almost March and nothing more has happened on rescheduling, other than some deadlines being missed by the DOJ. So just a
Yeah.
note on that really nothing has happened since the Oval Office on that front, much to the consternation of, I'll call it cannabis Twitter. But Mark, I want to move to a different part of Capitol Hill and the Supreme Court, because as we were getting ready for this morning, new ruling from the Supreme Court around tariffs, which obviously we're not importing or exporting cannabis from the U.S. at least. Talk about sort of that ruling and what it might mean for sort of ancillary parts of the industry, especially things that do get imported, especially from China.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, depending on your perspective, it was, the ruling was either restored faith in the rule of law or a complete tragedy.
Right.
So I'm not going to state a position on it because I want to stay neutral, but I don't want to piss anybody off. But look, it is Trump and Lutnick have made it clear that they are going to find other ways to impose tariffs, and whether those will stick, but it will. I would imagine that this will help with on the margins in terms of the cost of paper and packaging that's imported, the cost of vape devices and cartridges and all the other sort of paraphernalia that gets imported has been subject to taxes. So hopefully, we have to see how it plays out, but hopefully over time we will start to see some of that margin restored.
Yeah, and the rule of law, not something like that, something minor like that.
I'm interested to see if companies start suing the Trump administration or the federal government for all the costs that they've borne from these tariffs. Like, I imagine that this is going to be a fight, like not just in cannabis, but in every single industry that has a global supply chain, which is every single industry.
Yeah.
So, I imagine that's going to be a fight and going to be pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah. Fun to watch. Fun to watch? Interesting to watch.
Interesting.
It'll be interesting to see if Congress, if he tries to impose some of these through Congress, is Congress going to play ball? And, and some of the tools are more limited through other sort of routes. And so it's going to be a lot more piecemeal. It will depend a lot more on where the goods are coming from. Who knows? But it definitely continues to make this interesting. And hopefully any margin that we can help restore, the better.
Yeah, for sure. I want to keep it, we're talking about international trade. Jeremy, I want to talk to you. This is, I think, the third or fourth week in a row we've had a conversation around major Canadian companies making major investments or moves in international markets, often in Germany or partly in Germany. And this week was no different with Organigram, known as OGI on stock markets, about a major move in Germany as well. This is a trend we've talked about for some time, but it seems like major moves are being made, and how as the beginning of the year kicks off.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a fascinating deal. I mean, again, like we've talked about this on the show for the last few weeks, there is a lot of M&A happening, which is interesting. This Organigram deal I thought was interesting for two reasons. One is it's, full acquisition of a German medical cannabis producer that has a footprint both in the Germany medical market, as well as pilot projects in, neighboring EU states. But also just for the purchase price, the deal is up to 250 million euros, which is a pretty significant cannabis deal. Half that is up front, and then half that is tied to an earnout based on different financial performance metrics. But look, I think from my armchair strategic analysis, it's a pretty good deal for Organigram, right? I mean, they want to put as many dots on the map as they can before their American counterparts are able to do so in the same way with the same backing of a major liquid exchange like the NASDAQ and with federal coherent policy in Canada. So they're able to do deals like this. We have seen some US companies try similar deals. I mean, Curaleaf has a European operation, but it's much more tortured in how it's set up, and it's difficult to do. Whereas this is just a Canadian company outright acquiring a German medical cannabis producer and using it as a platform to dominate Europe. So I think it's pretty fascinating, and it's a trend we've seen pretty recently. I mean, we spoke with the Aurora Cannabis CEO, Miguel Martin, just last week. And he talked about how, the growth story is really Europe and global. We saw High Tide, another major Canadian company, pursue an acquisition of Remexian Pharma. It's a smaller deal, but it still gives them a major footprint in Europe. And so, look, like I'm watching pretty closely how every single Canadian company probably is now going to look to Europe, and the Americans are going to be jealous.
Yeah, it strikes me, Jeremy, because you were writing about this way back in the day when you were a Business Insider, about the Canadian advantage. And it didn't seem like it was going to be, I think the thought was like, we'll create these, as a Canadian, we'll create these brands that will have international impact. The next Coca-Cola, the next Pepsi, the next big brands. It turns out that some of that might have been true. It wasn't necessarily about brands, but about footprint and about platform. And the companies that we were even talking about some of them are still around and still doing this. Aurora and Organigram being two of the early ones here in Canada. Not so much with massive, million square foot greenhouses all over the country exporting around the world. It's a much smaller footprint from a cultivation perspective, but also the international part has become real, and it is built upon federal legalization here in Canada and the regulatory environment that demands GMP, manufacturing and processing, and it is this sort of other market that is not the U.S., but is still big and growing. And as Miguel Martin said, there's still much more road ahead than there is behind, and that's why they see the growth that they've seen. Why Organigram's following the same path, and High Tide on a different sort of track, but similar idea and similar ethos. Good for Canada, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one thing we've learned, in my years reporting on this space, Jay, your years being in the space, is that the Canadian consumer market is just not that attractive to create, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? It's useful, and it's certainly a big market. But the most useful thing is the federal coherence. However the policy is written, whether it could be more favorable to business or public health, and managing those trade-offs. Like, I'm not taking a position on that. I'm just saying that, with federal coherency, I don't know if that's a word, coherent regulations, comes the ability to list on deeply liquid exchanges, and comes the ability to actually pursue deals in jurisdictions where cannabis is legal, like Canada, and in Germany, where cannabis is legal. And so we're seeing just the more, regular corporate M&A emanating from Canadian companies in a way that, I think a lot of American companies certainly hope to be able to do so under Schedule 3, but the jury is still a little bit out.
Yeah.
I think it's also, I was just going to say, I think it's also worth highlighting that, Organigram did get a $125 million investment from BAT. So they're about 30% of their common shares, I think, are owned by BAT.
And their CEO as well.
Right. Well, yes, there's that. So good for Canada, good for global tobacco, I guess.
I would just, yes, everything you just said, and major investments like that from tobacco or otherwise are only available to cannabis companies that have federal legalization, because while they are tobacco, they are still fairly conservative companies in how they allocate their resources and people and cash. And the next big ones may not be tobacco, but maybe big alcohol and beverage, right? With similar portfolio, similar sort of reach, similar cash.
Yeah. As an operator in the space, I'm excited for this because it means Organigram and maybe their friends at BAT will be there investing in opening up those markets, because Germany famously is pretty limited on the form factors they offer, but Organigram has a pretty large suite of IP that they would probably want to bring over. So, if they can pay the pioneer tax, wonderful.
I like that. That's opening the way for second mover.
That's
advantages.
Right. I'm happy. Fast follow.
Mark.
On a more macro level, I think, Jay, you're making a good point, and Jeremy, about the sort of how stable, coherent-ish policy helps foster this. And it just more highlights how, atypically the U.S. is sort of behind, behind other countries on this. And so it's, is that going to be, is that kind of argument going to be persuasive with, convincing Congress at this point? Probably not. But, I think that I think this kind of thing has an effect on the, on the margins, and it's a constant sort of building up of that pressure that eventually, the policy, economic arguments will eventually outweigh the scariness of drugs, and drug policy. I still think we're a ways away from that, but this only helps that argument.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you were an operator in the U.S. with a big footprint, I think you could also argue almost the reverse of that. I don't think you would do it publicly, but the chaos that's happening at the federal level is helping me entrench my position in Florida or Ohio or Massachusetts, New York, and that there is the fact that there is no predictability, and I am comfortable operating without that predictability, and maybe even doing pretty well or expanding my footprint nonetheless. It's clearing the playing field of more patient money, that's conservative money, that's not getting in yet, right?
Yeah, and that's been an argument. I've heard that argument a lot for about 7 or 8 years now from a lot of the big MSOs, not all of them, but and I've never bought it because I think it's true to a point. I think to be fair, I don't want to be totally dismissive of it. It's true to a point, but it only gets you so far. And I think it's also shown, I think that the past, how that's played out has shown that it hasn't worked for most of them. Right. So it's, the lack of interstate commerce, the lack of, everything is just, you can't survive in the long run under that.
Yeah.
So, but.
Yeah. Ben, can I backtrack a bit to something we actually talked about with Anna Ray and was newsworthy when you weren't here, but I do want to get your thoughts on it, and that is THC beverages being served at United Center in Chicago, not necessarily during Bulls or Blackhawks game, but sort of what does that signal anything to you or to the sector overall, or is it just a good news story with the press release?
I mean, absolutely. It's it's very notable, namely because it was it's a commitment from the owners of the stadium, which are famously tied to the beverage category through Breakthrough Beverage. And not only that, if things go well with the music events, then it can naturally transition over to the sporting events, which would be huge. But there's two things that are huge about this. One, it's the access point. It's the discovery mechanism that we have largely been missing in cannabis, right? You can't stumble into, or you can, but most people don't stumble into a dispensary and then try something just because they happen to be there. That is what happens at these big social events like music festivals. The other thing is like beverage backing, right? Right now, there's a huge momentum to get all the beverage voices kind of rowing in the same direction, be it distributors or suppliers, retailers, or the hemp beverage brands and operators. And so it just further signal that people have a large amount of confidence that this product category is here to stay. And what was really cool about it is, like, amid all the deliberation about what should and shouldn't be, they did a 3-year contract on this.
Right.
And it was just kind of hilarious. It's like we're all staring at this existential threat at the end of November or September or whenever they decide to do another appropriations bill. And yet, they're signing this long-term contract. So I'm here for it.
Jeremy, on the same notes, and I think it was in the details of maybe what we're reading or something similar in our newsletter, and that is a bill in New York that would allow, I think, low-dose THC beverages to be sold in liquor stores. Correct me if I get that story wrong.
No, that's right.
That would seem to pit, I mean, in this case, liquor stores against, I guess that's how I frame it, against the dispensary model, which some of the dispensary owners we know in New York will not be happy about this possible development.
No, but the brands will, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, like all these types of policies are managing those trade-offs. I've had, and Jay, we've talked about this, my a little bit contrarian view of the longevity of the dispensary model in New York City. I do think it's, a little bit a function of how the regulations are designed rather than meeting consumers where they're at. And I just want to be careful. I love all my dispensary friends. We love all our dispensary partners. At the same time, I think, these companies buying big pieces of real estate in expensive neighborhoods, like, let's say downtown Brooklyn, for people to come in for 2 seconds and pick up their preferred product is not a model that's long for the world. I imagine that, the liquor stores are very happy about being able to sell low dose THC. And it's sort of the tip of the spear to allowing, let's call them non-combustible products everywhere in the city, right? Like there is no reason why they can't be available in bars, restaurants, the Barclays Center, Madison Square Garden, Citi Field, what have you. And I think there is a tacit acknowledgement among lawmakers. State Senator Jeremy Cooney, has been sort of leading this to say, like, let's sort of meet consumers where they're at. And let's design regulations that make sense. But again, this is a draft bill. There's a lot to get from here to there. But, my insight is that the liquor stores are very happy about this. The brands are going to be very happy about the distribution. And all of a sudden, a lot of the bodega sellers, which have pretty strong unions, are going to say, we want in on this too. And that's a big paradigm shift for how cannabis is distributed to customers in the city.
I will still never be a Mets fan, whether they serve THC at Citi Field or not. That's like that wouldn't even make the games even a little bit more fun. Although they will have Bo Bichette starting.
Yeah.
Starting.
Unfortunately, they'll have Bo Bichette. Yeah.
Fortunately for Bo, bad for the Mets because, or good for the Mets, I guess. I don't know. Terrible to follow them. But that does it. Like there are. I'm not going to say a through line, but like the United Center, this bill in New York.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding the sort of cliff, I guess, for November on this, but like there is movement on this that seems to be slightly different than the conversation even a month or a month and a half ago, and it, not necessarily around hemp-derived, but really around, is there a second category of cannabis products that will have a different distribution model?
The bill does. I think it is. The cliff is absolutely relevant to the bill just for the amount of products that can be in the stores, but there's no reason why traditional New York City, the traditional side of the industry, regulated cannabis industry in New York, can take advantage of this too, right? And so it's sort of a pretty interesting, I don't know, it's a pretty interesting dichotomy.
Wait, so I apologize, I don't know the detail in enough detail to yet, but could a traditional licensed producer then take that product out of the system?
No, it's the liquor stores themselves will have a license to sell cannabis.
I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see, okay, thank you, that makes sense. It's an interesting approach, but it is it sort of solves a little bit for the problem, but I still remain a little skeptical. I was going back and forth with somebody on LinkedIn about this earlier this week. I'm more skeptical about the viability of sort of intrastate hemp products in outside of the system. Basically drinks sort of being continuing when if the cliff goes over, or and the loophole is closed, because you're going to lose a lot of the distribution from the big distributors, and that to me is what there's a lot of reliance, for better and for worse, on that system in order for this to really sort of break out, and you're going to lose that.
Yeah, yes and no, but a lot of big distributors, so to speak, have kind of local regional reps that kind of own those markets, right? And so it's like, if you have, there was a deal where Southern Crown just bought up some New York, or not Southern Crown, sorry, Southern Glacier bought some New York distributors through the AB InBev network, and so those are kind of like hyper regional, right? Same with South Carolina, it has a large market share distributed through Southern Crown, and it's you kind of have this state to state kind of distributor market, and so I think that could very much work. I love the kind of this concept of a layered licensing and co-location.
Yeah.
Like this is a trend that I think will continue to lead to what Jeremy was saying, is like this belongs in all these different marketplaces, and you'll just have different style of licenses with different potencies. It's like dispensaries can have this, and liquor stores can have that. And I think if we start looking at what's happening across all these different states, is that this is how like regulatory convergence happens. This is how, like if we take what Oregon is doing, they're having hemp licensing kind of like clearinghouses, right? It's like you can import hemp. It has to go through a hemp handler's license and then get distributed into the state network, right? And so at that point, it would be really easy to kind of bring together hemp and cannabis under one framework and then have those licenses kind of apply to both. I would
also welcome everybody here to Eastern Canada, where many of the liquor stores, because it's provincially run liquor stores and provincially run cannabis sales, you can actually buy both in the same location. Like you go to like a separate sort of window, if you will, like a building within a building to actually buy.
And it doesn't explode or anything.
What's that?
It doesn't explode and people don't die.
I'm going to go in the store and buy all the things I want. It's great.
I want to go back, Ben, to one thing you said. Is I don't fully agree with the issue about the regional and local sort of distributors, because remember, this still rolls up to a parent company that has a federal license to a certain extent, and is, and a lot of those big companies are also under pressure through a lot of, federal antitrust suits right now. And so the question is, are they going to still be willing to take that risk, if the product is once again a controlled substance? And, that's to me the difference is, yes, it's physically there. It's just, are they, if it's a controlled substance again, are they willing to still do it? And I'm not, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe now, maybe this was, the past year has been a test case, and they're seeing that the federal government's not doing anything. So they'd still be willing to take the risk. But I think that the risk will be different. And that's something that they're going to need to think about.
What the last couple years has taught me is that if it sells, people are willing to take more risks, and so and people are willing to fight for it, and that's why we see the beverage momentum right now.
I don't disagree with that, but but at the same time, currently it is mostly legal, and that's different. Again, but versus.
Oh, you said it.
I've said that in my musings that it's mostly. I agree. But it's different, because then you get into the problems of money laundering, you get into all these sort of ancillary problems that, again, are a lot scarier. So I think it's one of those things where it's an interesting problem for us to keep an eye on. And I think, we've both identified here, that sort of where, that, it's who knows at this point. But this is so interesting. That's what I love about this stuff.
That's what I love about this stuff too. And it's also, we're coming up on time, and I want to thank you, Mark, Ben, Jeremy, for this Friday touch point. But also, I think we're having very good conversation. We're getting some good feedback in the chat as well. So I want to appreciate all of you for the work that you put in every week to do this. And welcome back, Ben, Jeremy, and Mark. We will see you again next week, as long with Ben and maybe Anna Ray as well. Maybe we'll get some guests as well, some special guests for some insight on this and other topics as well. But Jeremy, Mark, Ben, thanks so much. And all of you for watching and staying tuned. Find us at cultivated.news. You can find Ben wherever you get your podcasts at High Spirits, but especially on YouTube. I would recommend you do that. And go to Cannabis Musings and subscribe to Mark's Substack, because it's a great read. And for that, everybody, have a good weekend.
Go Canada.
Go Canada.